Preston Bell Charles III.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcellus Harris. This is David Levy.
No, we're not doing that.
Sorry. This is David Levy. My name is Marcellus Harris. And
wait, one more time.
okay, I purposely didn't write out every single word we're going to say on this paper tonight, and right away I made a mistake.
We see that.
You're Marcellus Harris.
Very good.
I'm David Levy, and this is the World Wrestling Federation. Welcome to True Theater. We're so grateful you could be here tonight to help us continue on our 16th season. Yeah, it's crazy, right? Curious, do we have any first-timers in the audience tonight? Wonderful. Welcome. You're in for a real treat. And if we're around for 16 more years, we got plenty more stories ahead for you.
Oh, me. For those of you not in the audience tonight, we are coming to you live from the historic Memorial Hall in downtown Cincinnati.
Big round of applause for our friends here.
And thank you to all the staff and volunteers who have always made us feel like family and treated us like friends.
Indeed.
And making us feel so welcome. Warm and fuzzy.
Thanks. And for those of you watching at home, you can thank Norse Media, Northern Kentucky University's student-run media organization. They make this affordable to us, and if you're at home right now, I know it's going to seem a little weird, but why don't you give them a round of applause? Oh yeah, thanks. Oh, you too.
Now, this is also often the point in the show where we remind the watchers at home who are joining us for free that if you'd like to donate to the cause and help us continue to live stream these events for every show, you can text TRUE16 to the number 44321. Click the link that comes back. The rest should be self-explanatory, but I feel like tonight's crowd is a little bit larger than usual, and if you keep coming in these numbers, perhaps we can stop asking for donations altogether.
That would be really cool. But not yet. So, any of you watching from home feels like helping this scrappy little 501c3 nonprofit continue to carry on its mission to build community by sharing true personal stories. That number again is 44321, and that code, TRUE16. Operators are standing by.
Tonight's ASL interpretation is made possible through the generosity of Cincinnati State and their ASL interpretation program. Tonight's interpreter is a cast regular and favorite. Please give it up for Dawn Caudle.
Just real quick before we get underway, this lady over here has over 40 years of professional sign language interpreting experience. She's interpreted for such big names as Stevie Wonder, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Billy Graham, Lily Tomlin, Robin Williams, Barack Obama, and right here on this very stage, part of season 8 of RuPaul's Drag Race. She is interpreted at births, bedside, at deaths, and everywhere in between, including hula lessons and dog sled races and other events all around the world.
And because she's been teaching others to do the same as the chairperson of the interpreter training program at Cincinnati State for around 25 years, we've been honored to have her interpret for us for about 2 seasons worth of the shows now. So word on the street is you do not want to get into a hot sauce tasting contest with her, but you can certainly put your hands together for her once more. Now, those of you who have been here before might recognize that the camera crew for Norse Media appears a little bit larger than usual. The extra cameras are here courtesy of a grant received from the Northern Kentucky University Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement to, simply put, create a documentary on the idea of agape love. As part of this series, the stories shared tonight will be used as a leaping off point to further explore the topic in greater detail.
We hope this isn't awkward, but by being here tonight, you might end up in footage that is used for the documentary. If this is not to your liking, please do not be shy about reaching out to me privately, and we will make it up to you somehow. Our first concern is your enjoyment of the stories. So tonight is a one-off departure from the norm, and we hope that it will not disrupt your usual experience with us.
Now, those of you who haven't hightailed it out of here will also have the opportunity to intentionally appear in the documentary, and we'll share more details about that later.
But first, a few words about agape love. which is, after all, the theme of this evening's stories. We thought about calling tonight's show True Agape, but then we thought everybody would be wondering why we're doing an evening of stories about wide open mouths. True agape, right? But the term agape love has roots all the way back to ancient Greece. It's a selfless love, unconditional love, sometimes sacrificial love, given without the expectation of anything in return. It is frequently used as a Christian term, but is a very secular phrase. And I would hypothesize that there is much more of that in each of our lives than we realize if only it were tested. I think we're going to hear a lot more of what we're talking about in tonight's stories.
And with that, we always say at True Theater that everyone has a story to share, and the only difference between a stranger and a friend is the sharing of that story. Tonight, you're going to make 5 new friends.
The first of whom is a producer, director, writer, editor who has racked up 23 years and counting as a professor of electronic media and broadcasting at Northern Kentucky University, where he teaches on media aesthetics and screenwriting, among other things, and leads the aforementioned student-staffed NKU Video Production House Norris Media. He also serves on the board of directors of the Northern Kentucky Forum and True Theater. And despite all these titles, he identifies more as a family man, which will be eminently clear in just a moment. Please give it up for Chris Strobel.
Good evening. When I was around 9 years old, my parents moved my brother and me to a house on 7 acres of land in the middle of nowhere. There was like cow pasture here and cornfield over there. It was a cool house. There was like the walls of the house were the kitchen were like 12 inches wide because it was a log cabin. They just kind of covered it over when they built the rest of the house. And there was an outhouse. We had indoor plumbing, but there was an outhouse, and that was cool. And it was just so remote, and it was a fun experience for the time that we lived there. But when you're that remote, you really have to, be a tight-knit family. And we really were. My brother and I, Greg and I, basically never fought. My parents showed us nothing but kindness and love. And I think my dad really liked that separation. And when we were building what became their forever home, a couple of miles closer to town, but still somewhat in the middle of nowhere, it was still very rural. And that house had a feature on it. There was a deck around the house, and my brother and my dad and I helped and probably hindered a little, build a gazebo. And that gazebo got a lot of use. And there was a porch swing that Mom and Dad would swing on, and there were benches that we could sit with them. And we would sit out there and we would talk and we would listen and we'd just kind of be. And like I said, I think my dad really loved that. Because my dad was a lover. He was a very genuine and romantic man. He married, my dad's name is Chuck, and he married his high school sweetheart, Peggy, when he was 21 and she was 18. And that kind of defined a lot of our lives. One of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me, I was having lunch with him and talking about this young woman that I was kind of interested in trying to figure out how to date, and he's like, I think he saw something. He stopped, he said, whatever it takes to get the girl. It was good advice. 33 years later, Kim and I are still very happily married. And she's out there somewhere. But it wasn't all just that kind of love. He showed his love through action. And through action, what I mean by that is that when we were involved, if my brother and I were involved with something, Dad was involved with it. Now, maybe not in the nuts and bolts. I think he liked having other people to be able to have that hands-on with us. But he would make sure that the organization ran well. So like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, he was the district commissioner. For the high school band, he was the booster president. Little League Baseball, Babe Ruth Baseball, commissioner again. If we were involved, he was involved. And if we were involved, he was involved. And I think that showed us a lot about how to give to us, but also to others and those in those organizations. For example, when he was leading the band Boosters, he organized for the band to go to a parade in Washington, D.C., and I had just graduated, so I accompanied as a chaperone. And in that interaction, it allowed me to really see and understand how much time and effort it took for him to give that opportunity for the band members to just play and have fun and experience it. And that giving to the community garnered him some respect. Not just some respect. It also, another example, when that baseball I was talking about, Babe Ruth baseball, I made the All-Star team one year. It was the very last year I played. I am pretty certain I was the last player selected because I was a first baseman and I played an inning or maybe two in right field. And I'm sure that why I was selected was because of what my dad brought to the organization. I accept that. I'll take it. He also took care of the community in his professional life. He was an environmental chemist for a paper recycling plant in Cayuga, Indiana. And sometimes he would also test water purity levels for cities in the area. His chemistry background, when the U.S. Army was wanting to dispose of some of the VX gas at the VX depot in the area, he was on the commission, so he negotiated with the U.S. military about the best and safest way to get rid of that really just horrific chemical weapon from World War II. And let me tell you, the entire region was happy when that was gone. Right around that time, a little after, though, we really started seeing some signs that early onset Alzheimer's was impacting his cognitive abilities. And that love that he had been expressing to all of these people and us, it didn't go away, but it narrowed and it softened a little bit. And then sometimes it hardened because there was anger. And I think there was some obstinance. I mean, because he was a very proud man, self-made, successful, and he could feel his brain betraying him. Then there were some hallucinations and some incidents that were a little bit frightening, and we started to realize that not only was Dad potentially kind of a wandering risk, but he could be a violence risk for those around him and himself. And we started to have to look for a place to be able to help us take care of my dad. Now, I started searching around Cincinnati, and I toured a number of different places, and they were really nice. They're probably not as cost-effective as we would need, but they had beautiful lobbies, and they would have apartments that looked really homey, and it was really good. And they probably were a really good place that he could go to. But I also realized that where Dad was and where he was mentally and as he was, that probably wasn't that important for him because he wouldn't really realize it. And beyond that, we live in Cincinnati. My brother lives in Denver. These are places that Mom and Dad would go and visit and vacation in. It's not where they live. They built their life in Clinton, Indiana. And that's where their friends are. That's where the network is. And in Clinton, there's really one option for Alzheimer's care, one primary option for Alzheimer's care in the city, and that's the Vermilion County Convalescent Center. And so my dad was admitted to and became a resident of what's called the expressions unit at VCC. That's the lockdown unit. Now, VCC is not the most glamorous of places. And I admit that I was sad when he was admitted, because he was admitted there, but also how it looked, kind of how it felt. And I thought also that with that lockdown piece, you have to punch in a code to go in and out, and that was to keep the residents from fleeing, and I understand that, but it felt like a prison to me. And in a way it was because of that, but the inside, the doors are open, they're not locked, the floors are clean, the beds are made, the people are friendly, and the need for the locks made sense. My mom, she would punch in twice a day, pretty much every day. That whole in sickness and in health thing, that's real. And she would go in and she would feed Dad lunch and dinner. And when we would visit, we would also go in once or twice a day, at least. And we would feed him. Most of the time, or many of the times, my daughter would, so she would come in and feed him. She would, as she was feeding her pappy, she would tell him about what's going on at school or what role she was going to dance in the ballet. We would then gather around a table, and we would play games, and Dad would sit in his chair. And every once in a while, somebody would go over, and we'd sit with him and talk with him, and we would just be with him. Dad was in the facility for over 13 years. And what I came to realize is that the love that was given by the staff, the aides, the nurses, was really pretty much unparalleled, because they recognized that, yes, these are patients that need to be in this lockdown area, but they also still contained the person that was there before. And they gave them respect with that. There were times when I would go in the morning, and I would go to Hardee's beforehand. I would get a large black coffee for me and a small black coffee with ice for my dad so he could drink it through a straw. And I would get if you've been to Hardee's, they've got these little round hash browns. He loved the little round hash browns. And so I would come in, and we would have our coffee, and I would grade. I'm a professor, so I would grade, or I would write, or I would tell him some things about what's going on in our life, and sometimes we would just sit there and listen to music. I would feed him his hash browns. And I think that he heard me. He wasn't necessarily the most communicative at this point, but he would smile when I would feed him the hash brown. And so there was a reaction there, and I believe that he heard me. But at this time, I also was able to really see how the nurses, aides, staff, how they interacted with the patients, not just my dad, not just me, me visiting him, and what the grace that they gave us to really interrupt their whole daily activities, because I would come in and change things because I would sit with Dad. But they would laugh and joke with the residents. So they're getting them out of a chair or into bed or into the bathroom. They would give the residents respect and treat them, as a human, as they are. And that amount of just pure love and care was striking. There's the activities director at VCC's Expressions Unit. Her name is Margot. And Margot, she would, any holiday, they celebrated the holiday. There was decorations, hats, food, all this stuff that she probably brought in on her own dime, just to be able to have these moments with the residents. For my mom, there was never a holiday, or never a birthday or an anniversary where Dad somehow acquired a card and he somehow signed it. And yes, I wholly believe there was still love from Dad to Mom, but really that was also love between these two friends who had forged this relationship in this terribly unfortunate situation. The VCC also would do things outside of the expression. So one time they held a prom for all the residents. And so some of the expressions folks who could come down would come down, but for everybody else in the retirement home, they could dress up in fancy dresses and come and dance to a band. And they opened it up for the whole community. They let them know what was going on. And the community donated dresses and suits for the residents to be able to experience this prom. My mom found a kind of a bib that looked like a tuxedo for my dad, and so I'm sure that he was sitting there in his tuxedo and she was in her fancy dress, and I'm sure they were holding hands, listening to the music, enjoying the food and the lights and all the, especially the music and the activity, as they were just together. And that it was wonderful to be able to have that moment, build that memory, but also hearken back to what existed before. My dad, he died a couple years ago. And as I think a lot of folks do nowadays, we were looking for something in lieu of flowers. And what could we raise money for? And Dad, of course, was involved with all these organizations. And the Alzheimer's Association made a lot of sense. But as we were thinking about what we could do, we realized that the VCC had really given so much to my family, to Mom and to Dad especially, that we wanted to give something back. And so, all right, in lieu of flowers, we want to give something to the Expressions Unit. And we thought, we would be able to help Margot with some things, and I thought that we would be able to do some kind of upgrade or some kind of cool thing. And then the community started to give, and they continued to give. And eventually, they raised enough money to be able to build a pavilion that's outside of Expressions, but inside of the enclosed courtyard. And this allows the residents to be able to get out there and be in the environment and not just be inside their wing anymore. They could and spend extended time out there. There's a sidewalk that's wide enough for wheelchairs to easily navigate. And that gets to a patio that's covered by this pavilion that all the Expressions residents and their families can be covered from the rain or the snow, hopefully not the snow, the sun. But they could go out there and they have picnics. They play games, they listen to music. And sometimes they're just out there and they just are able to be. It's kind of like a really big gazebo. And what I realized when I was thinking about all of this is that that's really what's important, right? I mean, recognition, success, money, whatever, all of that, that's important and it's good. But family, community, connection, time, love. That love that is freely given and freely received, really, that's really the only thing that matters.
Give it up again for Chris. Now, even after 33 years, our next storyteller refers to himself as a fledgling college professor. He says his happy place is helping people reach their potential and brings the same unstoppage. That's not a word. We'll have to have a conversation with Dave about spell check. I'm going to assume he meant unstoppable energy, whether it's 5 a.m. when normal people are still asleep or 10 p.m. when normal people want to be asleep. Right? Please welcome husband, father, and fledgling college professor, Peter Titlebaum.
My love is teaching. Spoiler alert. So my students call me Doc T, and I tell them I love going to school to be with them, and I love going home because that's where I get my ideas from. Part of this is I also tell them I'm an acquired taste. I am competitive, I am type A, I'm goal-oriented, and I'm never happier than when I make myself uncomfortable and I make them uncomfortable. It's a great relationship. I tell them, though, I don't need any 18-year-old friends. It's great if you like me. In 4 years, if you follow what I'm doing, you will be gainfully employed. I teach 5 different classes at the University of Dayton. And through all of them, I weave in career discernment, which means getting a job, which I thought we should do when we go to college. Also, building in community, because there's about 120 students in the program, and I need them to know each other. So that starts with, in an intro class, they'll have a teaching assistant who's an upperclassman. I bring in upperclassmen to be part of a panel discussion so they see examples. This is part of creating that community. Sophomore level class, I have practicum, which is resumes, cover letters, portfolio, and they have to get contacts from outside in the industry. I bring in former students to conduct interviews so they can meet upperclassmen and get that experience of interviewing. They also have to put a portfolio together, which is their best work. I teach marketing, and so whether they like it or not, if they don't know how to market, they're going to have a hard time getting a date. So making sure that they understand that as well. I also have a class that's a senior seminar, and so I have them from the first semester they're in school and the last semester, and it's like I want them to pack their bag because they can't come back. And these are all the things that you're going to need, and we have really some deep conversations about what it's going to look like for them when they get out. Now, there's one class that I haven't talked about, which is sales and fundraising. Now, I already know how the audience feels about this subject. 10% of you are like, wow, that sounds like it'd be an interesting class. And 90% of you are like, I'm out. There's no way I want to take this class. And if it makes you feel any better, my students feel the same way. They don't want to take the class. So I have to meet them where they are, and then I have to figure out how I can move them to my way of thinking. So when I first started this class 20 years ago, I set a goal for them to raise $1,000. No one hit it. That's more a commentary on me than it is my students, because I had to learn how to teach this group and what was important to them. So then, today, the goal is $1,600. About 75% of the students hit it. The class in 20 years has raised $600,000. And one of the ways I got them to get it was we partnered with a Special Wish, which is kind of like a Make-A-Wish, but it's regional, and it's in the Cincinnati, Dayton market. And they've been around for 40 years, and basically it's a wish for somebody who's facing life-threatening situation, and they get a break. And sometimes they'll go to Disney World for a week with their entire family and have a break from this disease. At the end of the semester, we have a awards lunch, but we also invite one of the Special Wish people and their family. To see the faces of the students realizing they did something for a perfect stranger, and to see the happiness on the parent's face, on the child's face, is special. In 20 years, we've granted 33 wishes. A wish today is $9,000. So it's amazing what my students can accomplish. And when we talk about what the kids have done, the record for the class and how much has been raised by one person is $12,300 in a 16-week class. And his name was Andrew Wilcox. And fun fact here, his mother was a student of mine in 1996. So reality is I'm old. I've come to that conclusion. But it's this really special thing that we get to accomplish. So I was looking for ways to change the class. I'm always looking for another way and what can I include. And then I get this email and a phone call from an alumni who says a dear friend of theirs, Gary Maioli, was a football coach, community man, won a state title in football in Park Ridge, New Jersey, died suddenly, and we'd really like to build a fund in his name, and we would like you to help us. And I thought to myself, well, I could do that. That'd be interesting. And then part of it was raising the money wasn't going to be the issue. How was I get to spend the money? Because this is going to go on for perpetuity. And so we raised the money, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to introduce storytelling. So gotten some experience with this. I've been part of True Theater a couple times. I loved how it made me feel, and I wanted my students to get that. So I went on a bike ride, because I do all my best thinking, whether biking or swimming, and I came back and go, I know what I want to do. I'm going to have a philanthropy tournament. Mind you, it's made up, doesn't exist, and I decide I'm going to do this. So then I explained to my students, we're going to do a philanthropy tournament. Okay, what's that? How old will you be when you can donate $500 to a charity that you care about? One kid says, 35. Okay. Another kid goes, never. I'm like, okay. During this semester, in 4 weeks, one of you or one of your classmates is going to donate $500 to your charity. I got their attention. Okay, this is kind of cool. It was able to be accomplished because low risk, high reward. What do you mean by low risk? Well, the class is worth 1,000 points. This assignment's worth 100, and they're guaranteed at least 70, which means there's no threat to their grade. Okay, but the big reward is they could get money for their charity. So we did this, and about 5 years into it, I still wasn't happy. I'm like, there's something missing. And I would have students that picked legitimate charities, but there was no tie to them. So I had a kid who picked the rainforest. Great cause. Your experience with the rainforest is what? Yeah, that was the problem. So I set up and said, look, for this to continue, for this to grow, we need to find your why. So I'm going to share 2 stories about my students. I called them prior to this, asked for their permission if I could share their story. Sure, Doc, no problem. Okay. So Rich Hertz tells a story, and his cause, so you know up front, was helping families after suicide. Okay? And he starts his story and says, look, I was on my way home from football practice. I was in 9th grade. And I get a call from my dad, and he says, I just wanted to call, tell you I love you. Can't be any more prouder than you than I am right now. You know, Dad, I'm going to be home in a little bit. I just wanted you to know. Phone call was 32 seconds. Dad passed away. And as horrific as that is, I look over and see in the front row his roommate. His roommate's white as a ghost. His roommate had no idea. He's lived with this guy for 2 years. And so you're thinking to yourself, what is it about letting yourself be vulnerable that changed the dynamics of the class? Next story, Mia Parisi. Her cause is oncology and pediatrics. And so when you talk about cancer in kids, we're for a rough ride. Her sister happens to be a nurse, and that's her specialty. And so she told Mia about a patient that she was taking care of. And every day, she would do nail polish on her fingernails. And that was the best part of her day. The little girl passed away. The mother says to Mia's sister, could you do her nails one last time before we bury her? You could have heard a pin drop. And that's when this class became a community, not a class. And when you see students who the last thing they ever want to do is be vulnerable in front of each other, fighting to share these stories because there's a chance to win money for their charity. Today, first prize isn't $500. First prize is $3,500. In 10 years, we've given away $44,000 to 40 students' charities. So they've learned how to do something bigger than themselves. And that touches me here, but it's why I got into teaching. It's not about the grade, it's about the process. And the hope is they will take the lessons long past we're around, and they're going to use it. So as my students had to find their why, I do as well. My why is all the teachers I had, all the coaches I had. Even my colleagues have helped build me, and again, I make people uncomfortable on a regular basis, but I'm still going to do this because it works. The 2 most important people are my first 2 teachers. My mom, who could make you feel you were the only one in the room. She had a dry wit, and she could break you up. But the one thing she could do is she could make you feel like you were the only person and she had your attention. And I try and borrow that when I meet with my students in my office, and I'm not talking about the schoolwork. I want to know where they want to go. I want to know what they want to do. They're seen. Then there's my father. Homage, because of the pocket square. because he always had one. But he instilled in me, you can't rest on your past laurels, and you're going to have to keep setting goals. So that's what I've done with my students. Thank you. This is why I love teaching.
One more time for Peter. Just real quick, we've got one more storyteller before a 15 to 20-minute intermission. I wanted to tell you now that during that intermission, not only can you compete to see who can buy the most T-shirts. I think the record is 3. That should be easy to beat. But also, we've got a camera station, a video camera station set up in the bar area out there where you have the opportunity to share a little testimonial of your own. There's a camera set up, and you can leave a message of thanks to someone who has had an impact on your life in a positive way, or share a quick anecdote about someone you love in the spirit of the evening, the non-romantic, unconditional love. Step up. Share your message, step away. We should be able to get a lot of you through. These recordings will be considered for inclusion in the documentary to provide some insights about agape love in a different way, lend some texture to things. Ben and Damien will be there to assist and help direct you through. That should be pretty cool, so hope you participate in that. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. I thought that would be funnier. All right, our next storyteller is not a professor, but recently retired from the financial services industry. When not spending his time with his wife of nearly 37 years, Kathy, his 4 children and 7 grandchildren, he enjoys bicycling, hiking, skiing, and riding, as well as engaging in his life's work, practicing spiritual direction. Please welcome Chuck Kohl.
The definition of love I tend to rely on to help me know it when I see it is acting in a way that is in the best interest of the other, whomever that other may be. My friend Dan was the embodiment of that approach to life. And I got to experience and receive and witness a lot of that love as he and I, along with our friend George, led Boy Scout Troop 14 in Hartwell. Dan and I each had sons the same age who entered the program. Hartwell, for those of you not familiar with what the area is, here in Cincinnati, it's a neighborhood about 10 miles north of downtown. It's very close to where Paddock meets Vine at the big infamous sign. But to look at Dan, you would not know that he is such a love and action kind of guy. He was about a foot taller than me, a foot wider, and a foot thicker. But if you talk to Dan, you got some insight into what made him tick. He had this voice that seemed to rise from the depth of the ocean, fall over his lips gently, and hit your ears in such a way that no matter what the situation, you felt like everything was going to be okay. Now, Dan's size was usually something that he used to his advantage and worked in his favor, except for the time we would take the scouts to play paintball. Despite wearing camo from head to toe, he literally had a camo hat, camo mask, and camo shoes. Despite all that, he was an easy target. There was no plastic molded rock or any empty cable spool big enough to fully hide him. And with his size came bad knees and slowness with speed that made him particularly vulnerable to the business end of a paintball gun. But that didn't matter to Dan. Dan truly loved being with the Scouts and having fun and enjoying the camaraderie. Dan was also a really big proponent of modeling for the Scouts all 12 points of the Scout Law. He was particularly fond of point number 3, a Scout is helpful, which I would translate as a Scout always acts in a way that is in the best interest of the other, whomever the other may be. And he also loved solving gnarly problems. And I think that's why when we took the Scouts canoeing on the very swollen and very fast-running Whitewater River, he volunteered us to go fetch their missing canoe that was trapped in a tangle of trees. So we floated downstream, we got the Scouts safe, we made our way to where the tree was stuck, and he, because of his size, was standing in neck-deep water, holding on to the canoe with both hands. I, however, was on the other side of the canoe hanging onto a tree with one arm, trying to loosen my end of the canoe. My interest in saving my skin overcame me, which caused me to lose my grip on the canoe, which caused Dan to lose his grip on the canoe, sending the canoe 10 yards downstream very fast against a tree where the pressure of the water folded the fiberglass canoe in half like a taco shell. Now, we did model helpful behavior, but I don't think we did it in the way that the livery manager expected. Now, Dan was really, really good at creating space where all of us could learn and teach the outdoor skills that you would expect of any good Scout troop. But he was also really good at creating space where we could learn and teach each other how to love our neighbor. Every year in March, we would take the boys on a hiking and camping trip in Red River Gorge in central Kentucky. The first weekend of March in 2012, there was a devastating outbreak of tornadoes that affected an entire region. In Kentucky alone, there were 26 fatalities as a result of that storm. Now, I don't remember if our trip was scheduled for the following weekend or the weekend after that, but what I do remember is what we as a troop decided to do about it. Under Dan's leadership, again, assisted by me and George, we decided that we would go down to Red River Gorge. Instead of hiking, we would help with tornado cleanup. So we got down there as usual, checked in with the Central Volunteer Office, and got assigned to an area. And we got to our assigned area. In front, there were 3 houses in our area, 2 right in front of us, 1 way back on the hill, all 3 completely destroyed by the tornadoes. And we had learned that that was a site where one of those 26 deaths in Kentucky occurred. So under that weight, we went to work. We started sifting through the debris, separating what was now trash from what might be salvaged as cherished family possession. When one of the Scouts found this big family Bible, you know, the kind that has the gilded edges, you open it up and it's got fancy calligraphy on the top left of each page, and a little space in the front to record family history. The family member who was with us was overjoyed by that find. Now, any Scout troop worth their salt would have done this, swapping out hiking for tornado cleanup. That's just what Scout troops do. But what was really remarkable was Dan's ability to lead us later on that night at camp, to lead us in unpacking why what we did that day, especially finding that Bible, why that was so important. That Bible must have had 100 years of that family's history. And we talked about how important it is for a family to know their history so that they know how to be grounded in community here and now. Dan also was really good at creating a space around that campfire that night where we all felt safe to process verbally the magnitude of human suffering we witnessed that day. Dan and I continued leading that troop for a few more years until our sons aged out of the program about 11 years ago. Now, when my son aged out, I was really quick to hang up my assistant scoutmaster shirt. George wasn't. He was in the troop for over 50 years. It was part of his blood. I got why he kept going. But it perplexed me why Dan kept leading the troop, even though he had no more sons in the troop. I thought, our time is done. Our sons are done. Let's just move on, for goodness sake. But as I see the fruit of what came from Dan's continued involvement in Scouts, I can see that he did that because he was being filled with life and love so that he could continue giving life and love, not only to the Scouts, but to his friends and family and all those around him. I now admire Dan for his choice to keep leading Scouts. The fruits I got from that relationship, I can light a fire in my fire pit and keep it going and long enough to entertain my friends and family. I can sharpen wood cutting tools. I could cook a pot roast, potatoes and carrots in the Dutch oven in my backyard in the middle of winter, and it would taste good. And I can meet people where they are. I can walk with them in their joys and their sorrows, as can my son, as can Dan's sons, and countless other people whose lives Dan touched over the years. It was about 4.5 years ago, I learned that Dan was lying on his deathbed in a hospice facility, waiting for lung cancer to fully consume his body. I felt so compelled to go see him for one last goodbye. But the fear and doubt inside of me was telling me that this was a bad idea. The fear and doubt mocked me, saying, "Who do you think you are? They don't want you there. You're not family. You haven't talked to Dan for years." But that need, that compulsion to go say goodbye to Dan won. And I made it to Dan's room at hospice with much of his family in the room. In fact, his wife, Debbie, was sitting in a chair next to him. She got out of her seat and insisted that I sit there. I don't know what I did to deserve that. Maybe I did nothing. Maybe it was more love being offered from a family steeped in love. But I accepted the invitation. I sat there with Dan, and we exchanged some chit-chat. And as we did, I was thinking about how I am a better person because I know Dan. So I stepped out of that hyper-masculine scouting context Dan and I were accustomed to. I said to Dan, "I love you, and I'm glad you've been in my life." A hush fell over that room. All eyes turned to us. But Dan hoisted his hand from the heavy blanket to embrace mine. We sat there for a few seconds in silence. And I said to Dan, over these next days and weeks, however long it's going to be for you, I'll be praying for you when I pray, what should I pray for? Now, I was expecting to hear a miracle cure. If I can't get a miracle cure, that I suffer as little as possible, that Debbie and the kids have everything they need for the rest of their lives, or some other Hail Mary pass that would result in everything returning to normal. Instead, Dan answered my question, pray for all the people who have been praying for me. In Dan's dying days, he continued to teach me what true love really is, acting in a way that is in the best interest of the other, whomever that other may be.
One more time for Chuck. Now, go forth and get in line to share your testimonial in the bar where all the best stories are told with Ben and Damien. And afterwards, pick up a t-shirt or 4 with Holly and Zach at the table back there, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes for 2 more fantastic stories. Once again, Preston Bell Charles III. Now, for those of you who don't know, Preston is a man of many talents. In addition to teaching violin and playing all around town at gigs, open mics, and just about as many street corners as there are street corners in Cincinnati, he drives for his father's funeral home, loves on his 3 kids, gardens, and makes documentaries with ArtsWave grants. You can see these and keep up with him on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud, citymusic.com, Reverb Nation. Follow him everywhere, but don't follow him home because that's just weird and creepy. We've always considered ourselves very lucky that Preston joined the True Theater family, but someone told me tonight that it's been 7.5 years since his first talents were brought to us, and we just want to shower him with thanks, so please give it up again for Preston Bell Charles III.
Folks, our next storyteller tonight served as a professional registered nurse for nearly 35 years and was unfortunately forced into an early retirement as a result of an accident, leaving her physically unable to continue doing the work she absolutely loved. She carries on, though, as a motivational speaker, playwright, and upcoming author, and says she strives toward the mark of her higher call, citing Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much is required. Please welcome Linda Sullivan.
Give it up for True Theater. I am so honored to be here and share my story. I gotta make it quick though, because in rehearsal I went overtime. But I think I learned that from my pastor that's here. So here we go. Alzheimer's disease. Let's talk about it very briefly, and I'm going to talk to you about it on a professional level. Alzheimer's disease, imagine this is your brain, and basically what happens, it deteriorates, and it even shrinks. And as a result of this, you get the brain malfunctions. In computer language, they call it technical glitches. Okay, these glitches, they manifest in the form of problems with memory, difficulty with thinking capabilities, and big trouble managing behaviors and reactions. And if you know, you know. Let the church say, Amen. Okay. Now, I also can tell you that this clientele, these patients are some of the most difficult patients to manage, and we're professionals. So if you find yourself in this position, get help, okay? But also, they can become some of the most lovable ones, glitches and all. So that's a professional aspect of Alzheimer's disease. Now I want to share with you something that is in correlation with tonight's theme, something that I learned while I cared for my beloved grandmother. Her name, Inez Gray. I cared for my grandmother as she succumbed to the ravages of Alzheimer's disease for 10 long, did I say long? Long years, a whole decade in my house, my home. But there was one thing I observed, and it is this: Alzheimer's disease, the nefarious thief that it is, it comes to kill, steal, and destroy everything. But there's one thing that it cannot touch, and that is the love that a person holds deep within their heart. Now, I'm going to give you some examples to prove my point, but first, let's get into how I actually become a primary caregiver and guardian of grandmother. There's one evening I am summoned to grandmother's house, and I say summoned because her devoted son, Thomas Fletcher Ingram, my uncle and father figure, he is retired, and he's going every day, and he's taking care of grandmother, making sure she's safe and that she can stay at home. And the reason he is doing that is something that is very typical. Once a spouse passes, it is then revealed that that spouse has covered the glitches. And apparently, he has done this for a very long time, and once he's gone, we realize that grandma is very, very glitchy. In fact, there's some days when she's just a glitch. But out of respect for my wonderful grandmother, I'm going to switch to the next definition for glitch. It says, life quirky moments. So, grandmother's very quirky. So Uncle, we're sitting at the kitchen table, and he proceeds to tell me, this is what he says. He says, my cancer, there's nothing else that can be done. I tried an experimental drug, it didn't work. And I'm going home to be with the Lord. And I hate to do this to you, but you are going to have to take care of mother, and you will know when it's time to put her in a nursing home. Now, mind you, I'm not surprised about this diagnosis because We all know that he's got terminal cancer, but he's been going and going, and look at me, that's what we do. We just keep going and going. And we all thought we had more time. So I'm sitting there, and I have that moment, like, you know, when you hear the crickets. And I say, okay. And I get to take care of my grandmother on a daily basis. And I'm just kind of appalled and ashamed because I'm the professional, and I didn't know she was this bad. So anyway, about 30 days to that day, Uncle was in hospice, and he does what he said he was going to do. He goes home to be with the Lord. So now, I've had about a month with grandmother, and yeah, she's glitchy, but also that strong, intelligent, fiercely amazing, loving Black woman who I've admired my whole life and loved even harder and learned so much from. She surfaces every now and then. And so I know in the midst of all that's going on, she is yet still in there. So, but the dilemma comes, do I tell her that Uncle Thomas is dead? Do I take her to the funeral? Some say this, some say that. Everybody's got an opinion. We know what opinions are, right? You got to go with your gut. I say I'm going to take her to this funeral. I take grandmother to the funeral, and she sits there like a zombie. Not one sniffle, not one tear, not one moan, not a mumbling word. And I'm wondering, well, perhaps maybe I shouldn't have brought her here. Maybe this is too much. But oh well, we're here. So then, as they say, a few weeks later, we're sitting at the kitchen table, listening to music. I use music a lot. Music therapy helped keep her calm and helped me keep my sanity. So we're listening to this artist. His name is Kirk Whalum, and he has this CD that's called The Gospel According to Jazz. And this song comes on, Wade in the Water. Wade in the Water is an old Negro spiritual that symbolizes going into the promised land, going into freedom, as well as going into glory. And all of a sudden, grandmother, she just gets overcome with emotion. She just starts clapping and praising. Thomas, I know you waded in the water. Thomas, I know you waded in the water. And in that moment, I think, wow, I am so grateful that I did not deny her the privilege to go to her son's funeral. Because why? Love never dies. So we go on through the 10 years, and it's getting glitchier and glitchier, and I'd like to write a book about that one day. And we get to the bittersweet end. Now, in the end stage of this disease, she's no longer able to talk. She's no longer able to swallow. She has no control of her bowels and bladder. She can't move. She's essentially a baby, my baby. And I'm responsible for everything for her now, everything, literally. And so about 3 days before she actually passes, it's a Saturday night, and I get her cleaned up, straighten her up in the bed, and I look, and boom, she's not breathing. The little girl in me gets freaked out. I lay on her, I do an Elijah. I lay on her and I just cry. Mom, no, please come back, come back. I'm not ready. Come back, come back. And then Nurse Ratchet takes over. That's what my friends and family affectionately call me, Nurse Ratchet. And so I'm ready. I'm about to do CPR. And I look at her. She's so frail and she's so fragile. I'm like, you know, that's going to cause trauma. And she's been through enough. I stop myself. I can't do that. But I hear a little still voice that says, try one rescue breath. And so I do what I've never done before ever. I put my mouth on my grandmother's mouth, no protective gear, no bag, and I give her the one last gift I can. I breathe the breath of life into her. And all of a sudden, bing, those eyes open, and she gives me the look. Every mother, including my mother right there, has a look. You know the look. And so I'm thinking, wow, she's looking at me, I'm looking at her. And I know she knows me, and she knows I know her. And I say, I'm sorry, I just can't let you go. I said, and then I just bust out laughing, and she looks at me as if, now, what is wrong with you? And I say to her, you remember all those times when people would congratulate you about me becoming a nurse and how good it was that I went to university, and you would so proudly and boldly, you'd say, do you think that I didn't know what I was doing when I sent her to nursing school? I sent her to nursing school so when my time comes, she can take care of me. And guess what? That has come to bite you in the butt. And then instantly, she gives me this look. And to this day, I still can't describe really what it was, but it was like angst, trepidation, like, let freedom ring. Girl, you gotta let me go, you know? And in that moment, I get convicted in my soul. Because I realize that she has been holding on all this time just for me. And I'm being selfish. And I gotta let her go. Because she's been suffering so much. And everybody involved suffers. It just like it affects the patient, it affects you mentally. It affects you physically. By the time she passed, I thought I might have a heart attack any day myself. It affects you financially, socially, and spiritually. So anyway, I look at her, and then I become Monty Hall. Let's make a deal. Okay, you can go, but you're gonna have to wait till one night when I'm at work, or you're gonna have to wait till my back is turned. And she looks at me as if to say, all right, I got you, I hear you. And I bet you won't bring me back a second time. So anyway, that 3 days later, my amazingly fierce grandmother, she transitions in the middle of tornadic weather. The hospice people can't even get out to come to us. And so, again, just like she said, Nurse Ratchet. And I have to go get the emergency box, make my grandmother as comfortable as I possibly can. I gotta give her her last rites. And I gotta ensure that she dies in comfort and with the dignity that she so well deserves. I do that. And then we're at the gravesite. We have balloons. They start popping, pop, pop, pop. And in our neighborhood, that means maybe hit the deck, right? But then all of a sudden, we all just start laughing because we remember grandmother used to, not grandfather, grandmother, when it would be New Year's Eve, grandmother would get that shotgun and go to the back door, boom, 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 Happy New Year. And then all of a sudden we look and there's 3 balloons going, 1, 2, 3, into the westward sky. And I say, there goes grandmother, uncle, and my dad. Thank you for letting me share.
One more time for Linda. Now, friends, we hope you're enjoying tonight's stories and will consider joining us again, because we're back right here on April 23rd, where the theme of the stories that night will be birds. Because why not? And then on July 23rd, where by audience vote, we will be revisiting a theme for the very first time, crime.
Now, if you're thinking, hey, I might like to share a story at one of these shows, there are a few ways you can go about getting those stories in front of us. Several of the storytellers you heard from tonight, we first met at a pitch night held at the Northside Tavern, Cincinnati's great institution at over 54 years old. We love going there, and it's like an open mic style event. People get up, they share a short version of their story, and it's free to attend, it's free to participate, and it's like just a free storytelling evening all of its own. We're going to have one of those for True Bird coming up on, what is the date? It's probably on the screen behind me, Tuesday, March 17th from about 7 to 9-ish. So come on down to check that out, pitch some stories. And if you are going to come and pitch a story, please head on over to our website at truththeater.org and fill out the Submit Your Story form and let us know you're coming so we can expect you.
This is the part where you say, keep an eye out for further details.
Keep an eye out for further details.
Speaking of keep an eye out, if you're not already doing so, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, the mailing list at truththeater.org, ending in RE because we are fancy.
All right, folks, our final storyteller tonight is a healing touch practitioner and a fabric artist. As an artist, she created the social fabric DNA weaving experience where she leads communities in identifying strengths and insights revealed through art. A former grade school teacher, university administrator, and nonprofit curriculum director, as you're about to hear, her family extends well beyond her husband, 2 kids, their partners, and her 2 grandkids. Give it up for Geralyn Sparough.
Good evening. I have the honor of closing the show. You may have heard the phrase, grief is love with nowhere to go. But I believe, given time and opportunity, love will find a way. I want to tell you a little bit about my brother Jamie. He's my youngest sibling, and he was wonderful. I was 10 years old when he was born, and when my parents walked through the door with him, I grabbed him out of my mother's arms. No lie. And my mother used to say very often, up until just a few years ago, that his feet never had to touch the ground until he was 4, because I carried him everywhere. And that's only a slight exaggeration. We were close into adulthood, where he could carry me on his hip. When Jamie was 33, he stretched out on his couch one day to watch the Golf Channel and never got up. No known cause. I had my young family to keep me busy, but my parents really struggled with what to do with their love for Jamie, where it could go. And after they had been on a retreat together, they decided that they wanted to do some valuable work with youth, particularly adolescents. And my mom, who was a longtime nonprofit director, wrote a proposal to be part of a grant providing life skill development for adolescents here in Cincinnati in the West End. And the proposal was to be focused on things like catering, construction, graphic design, computer tech, and in our case, healthy life relationships. I say our case because my mom wrote me, my husband, and my dad, we were all educators of one sort or another at the time, into being part of a team with her. Initially, we thought we were going to be trainers for the faculty who would be providing these services. Ultimately, we provided direct services to a group of African American youth at the Finley Street Neighborhood House. We met twice a week for 9 months for the academic year. The program was open to any high school youth in the West End. They could come and attend. Somehow, we ended up with a dozen 15 to 18-year-old young men. They eventually became known to us as the guys. In preparation, my mom and I wrote up this really fantastic, I mean, it was stellar. It was so good. Curriculum. We had about 6 weeks of meetings all set before our first meeting. It was to be focused on self-respect and communication skills and just, powerful. And it fell flat. The first night, it was too much like school. So on the way home in the car, my mom turned around from the front seat and she said, "I vote we ditch the curriculum." And we all agreed. It wasn't even a moment's thought of like, yes, let's get rid of it. And we spent the rest of the evening talking about what it was we might do, what we were being called to do and be in this situation. 2 things we had learned that first night. One was that for most of the guys, we were the first white people they had met in close proximity other than a teacher, doctor, or dentist. Although we had Black family members and friends, we mostly worked in predominantly white spaces and lived in ones as well. There was a lot we could learn and would learn. The other thing was that we were all old. One of the guys thought that he could not get over the fact that I was as old as his grandma. Now, I thought I was a very young 46. My own children were only 14 and 17. They were the same age as the guys. But as far as they were concerned, we were old and white. And we would sometimes hear that. And that was okay, because they were young and Black. That's what we do, Well, we start having meetings. And early on, we arrived to the space. And there's this large TV, the guys are there waiting for us, because it was although it was after school, it was also after school for me, and I was teaching at the time. And the program was set to start at like 4 o'clock. And they're watching TV. And it's one of those reality shows that you've probably all seen at least a snippet of or a commercial, you know, hot tubs, beaches, swimsuits, beautiful people. And my mom says, "What you guys doing?" And in a rare moment of honesty in those early days, because they didn't always tell us the whole truth, they said, "We're watching Cake." And she said, "Cake? What's Cake?" And they looked at her and they said, "Well, girls." My mother, and some of you in the audience here tonight knew my mother, drew herself up to her full height and she said, "Cake? Girls aren't cake. I'll show you cake." Which meant that for the next 38 weeks, twice a week, she or I made a cake, which we brought to the meetings. Another time, pretty early on when we arrived, the guys were playing dice. They were throwing dice. And this was not something new that we had seen, but I had this brainstorm moment of I don't know where it came from, but it was truly a brainstorm of how to use the dice that they were playing with to get at a goal that we had, which was deeper conversation. And I had this massive list of conversation prompts that I printed out on cardstock, cut up, and numbered 2 to 12. There were 20 questions, 20 prompts in each number. And the guys miraculously agreed to play this with us. And so how it worked was they'd roll the dice, and whatever number they rolled, they'd choose a card from the top of that stack. And they'd answer the question. A couple of the questions that I remember are, tell us about a time that you were proud of something that you've done. Another one was, if you could only have one kitchen appliance, what would it be? Newsflash, microwave, refrigerator, big debate. Sometimes they'd ask us to answer the questions. Sometimes it would just move on, and one guy would answer a question, the next one would roll, choose a new question. And they often asked us to answer them as well. One day, the first question that was drawn was, "How long do you think you'll live?" A couple of the guys spoke up, and then everyone wanted to speak. A few of them thought they weren't going to see 21. There were several others who thought 30 was unreasonable to imagine they'd make it to. Only 1 or 2 saw old age in their future. We spent the entire session talking about hopes and fears and life experiences. They had lots of questions for us about what our lives and our hopes were. It was a sacred time. As time passed, the other groups stopped meeting. We were told it was due to lack of student or instructor engagement. I don't know, but I know suddenly we were the only ones meeting in the neighborhood house anymore. And although the guys had initially had to attend something in order to gain access to the gym, that no longer mattered. They came for a conversation, listening, and maybe a little cake. The end of the year comes, and we don't want to stop meeting. None of us do. My mom in particular really does not want to leave the guys. We're at our second to last meeting, I think, and we say, "What do you want to do? We could do something for the summer." And they say, "Let's make a film." Now, we kind of naively thought it was going to be like Little Rascals. Let's put on a show. And so we said, "Sure, let's do that." At first, our camera was one we checked out of the public library, and we taped a mic to a broom handle. My dad regularly referred to it as the broom mic instead of the boom mic. And we set off to make a film. One of the older guys in the group had written a script. Not sure when, but the script suddenly appeared when we said, "What do you want to do?" And there were parts for all of us. The old white people, the young black boys, and there's brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, several of the mothers, and the beloved coach from the neighborhood house. We all had parts. And we, kind of fiddled around for a while, and my mom had some connections and approached one of the local philanthropists, a wonderful man who will go unnamed, but he gave us some money to help us get a camera and a real mic and a few other things like that. And one of the things that we had wanted to do was to make this more like a summer job. So we were able to provide a stipend for the guys and the young women that were the main cast and crew. It was a bit of a surprise. We didn't know that we'd be able to do that. I want to say a little something about the compensation, our compensation, because as the school year program went on, we did receive a small stipend for each meeting that we had with the guys. But when we agreed to do the film, which might be a big word for it, we were paid in love and trust. And as filming went on, we learned a little bit about movie making. We learned a lot about each other. And the guys' families became our family. One of the mothers and I call each other sis. It's amazing how our circle of love grew exponentially. Well, the summer program took 2 years to finish. And we eventually had a Hollywood-style premiere at the 20th Century Theater here in Cincinnati. The guys came in tuxes, the young women in formals. They arrived in limousines. We had a red carpet, and a local newscaster was there to interview them. It was magnificent. Remember that conversation about life expectancy? We have attended 3 funerals. The first was for Michael, one of the basketball players. He was in the film. He died from a heart defect in his senior year of high school before the film was complete. The second was for somebody I really considered my buddy. His name was Geralyn. He was always telling me he was going to marry me. Always, every single meeting. He was murdered in a home invasion just weeks before he was to graduate from college. His university conferred his diploma posthumously, the first time ever. The third funeral was for one of the older guys who'd been away at college while we were having our school year program. He considered himself something of a guardian and protector of his younger cousins, RJ. He had the most beautiful smile and gave the best hugs, almost as good as my dad. He couldn't handle Geralyn's murder, and he took his own life when he was 27. It's been over 20 years since that first meeting, but we're still in touch with a lot of the guys. They're in their 30s now. They made it. One of them's going to be 40 soon, which blows my mind. They're fathers, they're successful businessmen, One's a fantastic chef. Joe, the script writer, is a rapper and music video producer. He made a second film, by the way. Another one just recently went back to school for an MBA. They're thriving. When my mom died in May, several of the guys and their family members came to her funeral. Joe flew in from Atlanta and spoke at her reception. He shared how much her love, our love, how much that experience and the years of support had made a difference for him. His mother was there, nodding behind him as he spoke. And as I watched her and listened to him, I realized how much my life had changed and the gifts I had been given. I still miss my brother Jamie every day. Yet, without his loss, we would never, ever have found new people and new places for our love to go and grow. Thank you.
One more time for Geralyn.
And for all our storytellers tonight, Geralyn, Linda, Chris, Peter, Chuck, Dawn, Preston, Norse Media, Memorial Hall, all of these people, and all of you. We always say it takes two people to share a story, one to tell it and the other to open their hearts and listen, and tonight you did just that. We look forward to seeing you at one of our shows in the coming future, or maybe even in March at our pitch night for True Bird. But until the next time we see you,
Be true.